Okay, sharing now. Well, recording now.
Okay, sounds good. I don't know if you're turning on video or if it's just recording.
Whoa. Just recording. No video from me.
Got it. Sounds good. Welcome, John. Welcome, Jack.
Hey.
Yeah, welcome to Wednesday office hours. We're switching up the format, and we also have a new host. So Derek, or Dendron Evangelist, will be organizing these sessions.
Yeah, and that's me under Script Automate. I'm going to be looking into getting my video better set up and for Discord since it doesn't pick up my webcam at the moment. But yeah, I'll be hosting these sessions and making sure they're scheduled out properly. I'll be figuring out. I'll be getting Luma set up right now for a few more sessions for the rest of this year, and yeah, it'll be every other Wednesday, 9 a.m. PST.
Cool. One thing that seems appropriate to mention here, I don't know if anyone else already knows about this, but Discord now seems to have event handling functionality. So
Yeah, I just saw that this weekend. We haven't had a chance to play around with it yet, but yeah, definitely it's something that we'll probably end up incorporating.
because it would mean no need for a separate Google Calendar thing.
Yeah, and we actually kind of stopped we switched to doing like the Luma invite just so that Google Calendar is kind of hard for people to sign on to. I think even if we go with the Discord, we'll probably still keep the Luma because a lot of people, like, if they want to sign up or like register for the event and don't currently have a Discord, then like Luma makes it easy to register there.
Right, something I'll have to look and see myself.
Oh yeah. All right. In terms of the format, so format for our office hours is relatively the same. So we have a Google Doc that is pinned in the office hour channel. Anybody can go on it at any time and leave questions. For questions, you can either just speak up or write it in the docs. And what we'll go over, so starting off with highlights from the past 2 weeks, things that or the team has been building that we're very excited about. And after highlights, answer any questions, and then if there's time, go over any current work or any like deep dives into specific parts of Dendron. All right. So for today, some of the highlights from the last 2 weeks. The first thing would be native workspaces. And Derek has been mentioning this for like the last 2 releases. We've been making a bunch of improvements in it. And essentially, native workspaces, they let you use Dendron inside of subfolders or anywhere else. So you can have an existing VS Code project, and you can also add a Dendron vault or a Dendron workspace into that project. So I'll share my screen to give people an idea of what that looks like.
Yeah, I was just actually testing out the recently that native workspaces, the initialization in a Python project I have. So pretty cool extra feature there.
Yeah, it is. And so to get into it, if you run first, can people see the screen? Okay. I know that.
Can you zoom in a little bit?
Yeah, sure can. How is this?
That's a little better. How's everybody doing with that?
I'll do one more zoom level.
All right.
All right. So the way that what I have open right now is just a tutorial workspace in Dendron. And normally after the tutorial, like you can either carry on with the tutorial, using that as your workspace or create a new workspace. Right now, if you create a new workspace, you're going to have two options, a code workspace or a native workspace. So a code workspace is what people are used to if they've been using Dendron. It's you initialize Dendron as its own workspace with a dendron.code workspace file. And the native workspace is any place where you drop a dendron.yaml now becomes a fully fledged workspace. So for example, if I go the native workspace route, I can point to a subdirectory into like an existing project and turn that into a workspace. What that will look like is a Dendron codebase, and it's a monorepo, but we also have a Dendron workspace inside of it. So right now, what this means is that you can use like Control L and refactor and rename, and you can use Dendron inside your coding projects. Right now, this workspace is mostly a test workspace, so we can test new Dendron features. But right now, where we're actually going to be migrating is we're migrating the Dendron developer docs as well as the Dendron user docs into the Dendron workspace so that developers working on Dendron can reference it inline while working on the code. And furthermore, what's going to be made available with this is in the future, for example, if you wanted to leave inline comments in the code, you could just do a wiki link and then do a go-to note and then navigate to that part of the code. And so this is, we're starting to work on the integration of the Dendron workspace not just being like a standalone thing, but being integrated into the projects that you already have. And a lot of the features, for example, like hovering over a link, see the contents, we're going to also be integrating within the IDE, so you can, as you're working through code or whatnot, you'll be able to take advantage of Dendron features and also see, for example, bidirectional links, linking code to Dendron notes and vice versa, and a whole slew of other stuff. All right, Derek, did I miss anything, or do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I think that covers most of the native workspace piece. Because what's cool then is that people would then be able to also make use of pretty much all Dendron features in that project, right? So if they had CI and CD all set up, they could pretty much publish a website out of those docs just as they would if it was a standalone workspace.
Yes. So they can publish, they can export, they can do links. Anything you can do in Dendron, you will be able to do in a native workspace. And a lot of the features are being worked on as we speak right now. But today, you'll be able to use the basic lookup features and have that alongside your code.
Cool. Okay, so what would happen in something like multi-vault workspaces? So we call this a native workspace. If someone had a different workspace and they wanted to make use of the docs in this repo, if they import it, would it just import that docs directory? Would it import like the full code repo itself, or kind of how does that functionality work?
Yeah, so right now, a native workspace is a collection of vaults. Like at the end of the day, like everything in Dendron is made up of vaults, and then a workspace is just, here's the collection of vaults I would like to work with. If you wanted to import, for example, the stuff inside the docs folder, you can actually just do a vault add, point to that directory, and then Dendron will import all the vaults from that folder into your other workspace. So logically, you know, doesn't make a difference because at the end of the day, like both workspaces, the vaults within a native workspace or a code workspace um, is the same thing. It's just a collection of Dendron nodes.
Awesome. I always love the interoperability and the ability to kind of do what you will with all your docs.
Yeah, and that's the idea. Is like you can mix and match different doc sets depending on what you're working for. A backend developer might need a different set of docs than a front-end developer, or as a technical manager versus a product manager. All right. So the native workspaces is a main thing we've been focusing on, and we will be continuing to focus on. Otherwise, though, within the last week, we've been doing a bunch of work on publishing. There have been some bigger areas in publishing is ability to publish mermaid diagrams, ability to publish k-tex, so which means using LaTeX equations and math formulas. We made the code formatting nicer, we made the table formatting nicer, and so it's a lot of the presentation stuff that our users have been talking about that we have addressed. And there'll be more changes coming, but essentially all the outstanding presentation issues we've been getting reports of should now be fixed in the latest release.
Awesome. Yeah, I noticed right away I applied and I think some other people might have mentioned it in the Discord channel too, was like you said, the code highlighting. That looks much better now. And so I already put that onto my own site. Is the latest Dendron. There you go.
Yeah, so inline code, nicer tables.
Oh yeah, I like that table.
And yeah, like first class mermaid support and also mathematics. All of these should now show up without issue. Right, and then the last thing to highlight, this wasn't exactly in the last 2 weeks, but it's been something of a major change in how we think of schemas or use schemas inside of Dendron, is this inline schema format. So schemas, they're one of the most useful features in Dendron, but they're also unfortunately one of the hardest to use. And it's this idea of being able to map your hierarchy into a schema so that Dendron can help you complete it, find it, and like structure it. And traditionally, the way that we've had this schema in the normal format is, so this is the original format where you give an ID to every schema and then you specify its children, which are also IDs. But because like a schema is essentially a tree, this is a much more verbose way of writing it out, and it's pretty error prone. So we've introduced inline schemas, and this was probably like 4 weeks ago. But it's still worth highlighting because it makes using schemas much, much easier. Instead of creating a separate node for every schema, the schema now mirrors the structure of your hierarchy. So you can specify a new node in your schema by adding a pattern field. And then if that new node has children, then you can chain that. And what that means is, for example, if we wanted to create a schema right now, let's call it, I already have a user schema, but let's call it a language schema. So I'm calling this language a namespace, which just means that the first child of the language is valid. And for a pattern, let's say that, we want to match this with Python TypeScript. Actually, so now let's see how well this live demo holds up. Python. I think I have an error in my regex. Let's just change this to Python. And for children, you can have data structures and, well, data structures and control flow. And yeah, as you'll see, it now shows up in the autocomplete when you try to complete that hierarchy. And then you can also attach templates to that. So for example, if you wanted the data structures note to have like certain sections, let's say like booleans, arrays, and dictionaries, you can now attach that as a template in this inline schema format. And now when I create a data node, it will be applied with that template. So none of this functionality is new, but the inline format just makes it a lot easier to express. Plus, now schemas will auto-update when you write them, so that you no longer need to reload the index or reload Dendron for it to take effect. And what this means is it's much more practical to make schemas as you go. The cost of entry is next to nothing, and it's very easy to experiment and try out different patterns.
No, and that's I need to make use of schemas more because I've been looking at the Godox project, for example, since they're creating templates for like best practices or common ways of doing tutorials and the like, and so then they create templates for all of those documents, and that seems like a perfect instance of taking that markdown into a template file and then using schema to make it so that each one already has an outline.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then for schemas, we're only going to be making them, there's more features coming along the way to make schemas more flexible and more expressive. And the idea is like any sort of structure that you want to represent about something, like you'll be able to express that in a schema. But right now, with just templates and hierarchy, it covers, I would say, like the 80-20 use case of what most people would want to do.
Yeah, we also have a templates templates repo, right? Because people can initialize their workspace to include our templates or our baseline schema stuff.
Yes. So if you initialize a workspace, you can choose between 3 different defaults. So the default one is an empty vault and then a vault with our template gallery. And so the template gallery has a bunch of schemas that people can start off with, for example, with journals or meetings, whatnot.
And people, and yeah, that's awesome. And they could pretty much, if they always, people could even just simply fork that if they wanted to make their own modifications or their own version of it, really.
Exactly. Probably the most common thing that people start off with is creating a schema for the daily journal. And then some other ones we have, it's like for code packages, and then projects. These are some of the most common use cases when people start off.
Definitely. I should make use of, since I'm already using the daily journal, I should create a template file because I pretty much always have the same headers. And
Mhm.
I keep forgetting I could simply just have it as a template file that gets pulled in and spells all those headers out, because otherwise I'm just kind of copy pasting. So awesome. Yeah, I like that inline approach. Makes it seem a lot less verbose of a schema file too, doing it that way. That's nice.
Yeah, and what's nice about it is that it, like visually, it kind of follows the same structure as what the schema is trying to represent.
Better for our
Right.
brains.
Yes. Um, so those were the main features that I wanted to highlight for today. Now, if there's any questions, Jack, I don't know if there was something specific you wanted to bring up today.
Well, one question topical to the native workspaces. Can I ask about any differences in how that would work if one was working with the CLI?
Yeah. So if you're working with the CLI, it shouldn't make any difference. So like in terms of the CLI, you can connect to your workspace, you can look up notes in a workspace, and you can delete notes. Whether the target is a native workspace or a code workspace, it doesn't matter. And actually, if you use the CLI today, the CLI kind of pretends that everything is a native workspace because
I
it
see.
only looks at the Dendron YAML file, not
Right.
the code workspace file.
So if you pass in the code workspace as an option, it just looks for the YAML file.
Exactly.
Okay. Oh, great. So if I started in a folder that has a Dendron YAML file in it, will it find that, or does that need to be specified?
It does not need to be specified. So if you're on the latest version of Dendron, so that's version 70, and then you open a folder that has a Dendron.yaml file, then Dendron will recognize that as a native workspace. If you are, in a folder and there are multiple levels of Dendron.yaml files, like you have a workspace, but you happen to have like multiple native workspaces, then Dendron will prompt you and ask you which one you want to initialize.
Okay. All right, that's handy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think since we launched Engine, one of the biggest asks has been, can we use this within our existing projects? Like I already have a project, I have a docs folder that I would love to turn into a Engine workspace, and so native workspaces like bridge that so that you can now take Dendron inside of the places that you already are versus having to use it as a standalone.
Right. Yeah, it seems really cool. So just so I understand what's going on, is Dendron actually indexing any of the files in that are not in the vault, or
It is not. So when Dendron starts up, it only indexes the vaults that are in the workspace. We will be introducing a feature, probably before the end of the year, to let Dendron reference external files. So, for example, like this is what I was alluding to with like being able to refer to code files in your Dendron
right?
and vice versa. And in those cases, what would happen is Dendron would keep track of the links that the notes refer to that are external to it.
I see.
But it would not, for example, index your code workspace.
Okay, yeah, because when you said bidirectional links, I was wondering how that was going to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
And how's the stuff with the CLI coming? Any progress on the rename?
Yeah. So I have this thesis seminar on Friday that I've been doing a lot of stuff for, so I haven't had a whole lot of time to focus on the CLI, but I'm trying to use the same tests as are being used for the rename move functionality in the plugin proper. Um, so I actually I wrote something up quickly, but it isn't passing the test. I'm not sure if my tests are malformed or if there's a problem with the code. So I'm troubleshooting it, but it seems workable.
Got it. Yeah, if you ever want like a second hand or a second opinion or whatnot, you can always submit a pull request in draft form, and post it in the dev channel, and then somebody from the team can step in and take a look.
Okay. Pull request in draft form, is that actually is that a designated part of the GitHub interface, or is that just
It is.
Okay.
When you submit a pull request, there should be a check mark that says, do you want to submit in draft mode?
I see. Okay. Oh, another today I learned thing.
Yeah. Every day there's more things.
Yeah. I mean, so with schemas, one of my earliest memories of Dendron is messing around with schemas and breaking the whole functionality of my workspace. So yeah, hopefully, if it's easier now, I'll try some things.
Yeah, not just you. I think I've done it too a bunch of times, and this is why we've done a bunch of work in just the UX. So like schemas will warn you now if the schema is malformed before you save,
Mhm.
and will tell you exactly where the error is versus just showing up like a giant error trace. So they should be a lot more ergonomic now. They might still be edges, but they should be different edges. And if you
Mhm.
encounter them, let us know, and we will get to them as well.
Okay. So I mean, I don't want to hog all the question space, but I do have more questions.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you get for showing up to office hours. So you get to take advantage of that.
Okay, well, there's one so one speculative question I have when it comes to Dendron Vim integration is since NeoVim apparently has some support for Node plugins, I'm wondering if that could be an avenue for more direct interfacing with the engine in some way.
Yeah. So in terms of Vim integration, I was actually going to write up a discussion topic this week about it because it's come up quite a number of times now. There are a bunch of ways of integrating Dendron into other clients. So there's the CLI route, which is what you're going through, using the
Right.
CLI to shim functionality. There's another route, which is or API server. So Dendron, when you run Dendron, it runs a local express server with an API that the Dendron client will connect to, and then that's what the CLI calls. It connects to that express server and then makes some HTTP calls. We
Right.
haven't formally we haven't announced like a formal interface just because it's something that we're integrating on. But like this is another way where clients can integrate because we are planning on exposing that so that people can build their own clients on top of that without resorting to the CLI, but making HTTP calls. And then the very last point of integration, which is something that we currently don't support but plan on doing in the future, is using the language server. So the language server is something, it's a spec that Microsoft introduced, and it's to be able to, give IDEs the ability to hook up to a common interface and know how to autocomplete, refactor, symbol lookup, and do all these things with different languages. And the idea is you can write one language server implementation, and you can use that for all IDEs. Originally, we were looking at using the language server spec as the way of building out Dendron. The problem we ran into, though, is that the language server is very specific. Like it supports like autocomplete. It does not support lookup.
And you're not going to get
while-
backlinks and stuff.
Exactly. So there were a lot of limitations with just using a language server implementation. But if you take a look at like all of Dendron's functionality, like a subset of that functionality, like refactoring, symbol, like lookup, renaming, that is actually part of the language server spec. And so future work, we are looking into taking the part of Dendron that is language server compatible and building out a Dendron language server so that if you're using NeoVim or any IDE that supports the language server, then you get the basics of, for example, rename, refactor, and like syntax highlighting and whatnot. Just switching to or language server backend. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting to know about. So, I mean, for my part, and I don't know if I'm using Dendron in a way that isn't actually native to its vision, but um, I mean, I really like the Unix philosophy, and that's tended to be the way my work flows and the way I use tools has ended up being. And I don't know if Dendron is exactly trying to be Unixy or but that's why I've been favoring the CLI and text pipelines and that sort of thing. And I also I don't have enough of an engineering background to know what the performance implications are of HTTP requests and responses being passed around versus text pipelines and whatnot.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess like there's multiple parts to that question, like the Unix philosophy, which is like everything like methods and commands and programs, they do one thing very well and you chain
Right.
it together. In terms of Unix philosophy, I mean, it's definitely something that uh, is kind of like a design principle, if you will. This is why, like, instead of like the Dendron architecture is client server, and
Right.
then within the server, like we also expose the CLI, and there are specific um, methods and commands for like every aspect of Dendron that you can chain together in various ways.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and beyond that, we are also working on further integration points. So, like Dendron today has a hook system where, like, after you perform a lookup, you can execute some logic. Um, we are working on a trait system where you can define your own custom behavior for notes and assign that to a trait.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also going to be introducing a type system. And so all of this, whether you call it the Unix philosophy, I think more in general, it's just like extensibility and hackability.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is core to our vision is Dendron. Like a lot of the reason why people are drawn to Vim and Emacs, like why I was drawn to them, was because it was like an editor that I had full control over that I could extend in any way that I wanted.
Right.
And so that's also a spirit that we want to preserve in Dendron is we give you a bunch of defaults and those should be good enough. But if you wanted to take it further and, customize those to do something like completely different or just in different areas, then you can do that. And so um, we're building with that in mind.
Okay. Well, that's really reassuring.
Yeah. And part of this is like our background. So like a lot of the people, like Derek here and me, we come from an AWS background, and so like at AWS, everything is this idea of like service-oriented architecture. So instead of hard coding like two services to talk to each other, every service exposes like an API, so that any other service can talk to that service, and it makes reuse of logic a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
So that is that part about extensibility. And then I already forgot your second question as I was talking. So if
Well,
you can
yeah, if it's something like so my understanding of this right now is that at least one of the main differences between text pipelines that go through standard input and standard output and HTTP APIs is structured versus unstructured text data. Um, so I mean, my question is, what are the differences in general, and are there performance implications and things like that?
Yeah, performance-wise, because all this is happening locally, there isn't really much of a difference. The main thing is it's usually easier to consume stuff over HTTP. Every
Mm-hmm.
language has ways of consuming HTTP
Right.
as a client, and then you can also like an API, like a formal API, usually has a better contract than a CLI output
Right.
because with an API, you usually have error codes, you have like types, you can validate the types depending on what the client offers you. Versus with a CLI, you can output in JSON, and then you have to do a lot of validation on your site.
Right.
An API is usually built to be consumed by downstream clients. versus a CLI, it can be consumed by downstream clients. And the Unix philosophy is like, yes, you can chain things together, but there's a lot less tooling, for example, around validation and checking and error handling and whatnot.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm still stuck in the mentality of hacking things together for myself and my local setup that aren't robust for distribution or whatever.
Yeah, it is definitely a lot easier to get started using the CLI, just because you don't like the commands are already there. You just need to pipe stuff to different outputs. And I would say like if that works for you, then continue and then like move on to it using the API if you feel like you need to. And I mean, in general, it's kind of like the core, like one of the core workflows in Dendron. We recommend for people is the Amoeba workflow, where like how do you split up your node? Well, once it gets too big, but you don't need to do any premature optimization, and so you can think of this as a similar deal.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, the feeling I get is kind of it's like 95% complete for my use case and like 1% complete in terms of what's possible and the potentials and room to grow.
Yeah. I mean, that's the cool thing is that there's always more. There's always more potential. And this is why like I think it's being extensible and being able to build on top of like the tools you're using is really important, just because like there's no way that we can capture everything that everyone wants to do, and it also doesn't make sense for us to do that. But as long as there's an entry point where people can do that, like that's where like this is part of the reason why people become developers, is because you can build out the ideas that you have in your head. So yeah, my point with that is that that's not a bad thing. Like there should always be more to build, and that's usually a sign that you're doing something right, or like you're going on the right path.
Yeah,
that the technology is generative and etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've always been thinking too, whenever I've been looking at how Dendron's evolving and the usage of it, it's been making me think. I mean, when you're talking about the Unix philosophy, it kind of made me think of how at one point Microsoft with Windows, they had to start creating a better way to work with the Windows API with how they had to come out with PowerShell, just because they did everything in that reverse fashion, right? Of let's focus on the UI and that user experience from a manual position, and then go kind of go toward the automation route rather than in reverse. And I really like that Dendron's focusing on let's get all these lower pieces in order, because we could always abstract away toward improving a user experience to kind of like how with even Linux adoption, where over time, because it's improved so much, the users don't have to know how to build Linux to to make use of it as and so I really like that that's what's going on, because then the feedback and all the awesome improvements we can get in the foundational layers, and like you said, then it means that future interoperability or extensibility just becomes much larger than other tools that just start with the UI alone.
Yeah, I dig it. I vibe with it.
Glad to hear that. All right, I think we are running at the end of office hours. If there are any closing remarks, Jack, I don't know if you had anything else that we'll have more of these, so there'll always be more chances.
Yeah.
But if there's anything more for today.
Well, I do have a super quick, possibly lazy question, conceptual question. I'm trying to do a thesis on PKM as a sort of field of discourse, community of practice, cultural movement, etc. I was wondering, do you have any aggregation of readings, or is there a Dendron reading list somewhere or something like this? Or
Yeah, we probably should. It's been I would imagine that, like, from everything people have discussed, that there is a reading list in the Discord history. Um, but there's some, like, in terms of like big figures in the field, there's Vannevar Bush, as we
Right.
may think. That's the canonical one. There's also the idea of the Memex. That was like an early idea of building a digital brain that can record everything. So from those two, you also like it's a good source in the sense that you can also find stuff that cites it and that it's been cited from to build up
Right.
like a tree of relevant material.
Okay. So that's
mhm.
that's one seminal starting point.
Yeah, and then this is, it's kind of selfishly promotional, but we also have a series about structural approach to note taking. So this is, the approach we advocate, where the idea is that a little structure goes a long way, and that the current trend right now is to move away from structure. Like, let's not worry about how notes are organized. Let's just link it together, and we'll be able to discover and find it.
Right.
And where Dendron takes an approach of like that can be useful in the beginning, but you will eventually hit a wall of not being able to find the stuff that you need. And
Right.
so, like, our approach is this idea of having a structural approach by being able to change that structure. And we have a bunch of blog posts on that we'll also leave in the office hour notes.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look around for those. That is a tension I'm really interested in discussing. Yeah, maybe in future office hours or just in the Discord or something.
But yeah, that sounds like a fascinating and very topical thesis. So would love to hear more about that as you advance.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit of a rush job, but yeah, I'll if I make something that seems worthwhile, I'll publish it in some way.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, we actually, and Dendron also has we do a greenhouse series. So if there's a time, I imagine if we wanted potential community presenters to just chat about something that they've looked into, if you want to do presentation, I bet that would be really cool. I'm sure we'd be interested in hearing that.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, that would be neat if things turned out that way.
All right.
Well, you're 1% of the way there. There's so much.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. This was a great session. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So.
All right, thanks, everybody.
See you in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.